Hi, I'm Kathy Bisbee, Executive Director of CMAP and host of Depth of Field. We have a very special edition of Depth of Field today. For Memorial Day weekend, we decided to talk to local veterans, both in Gilroy and also in the Bay Area. So I am here with two female veterans, actually both from the Iraq War, Emily Yates and Angelina Miller. And Emily, can you tell us, just start with a little bit about your experience in the Iraq War and what made you decide to go into service? And thank you, by the way, both of you, for serving.
Well, thank you for having me. My background is as a public affairs specialist in the military. I joined the Army to be a journalist, and the recruiter told me I could be a journalist. And
this was when you were 19?
This is when I was 19, yeah. And he didn't say that public affairs specialist and journalist were the same thing in the Army, but that's what I was, so interchangeable. And I deployed to Iraq twice in that capacity as a public affairs person, so it was my job to sort of spread all the information that the Army saw fit to print.
So sort of what they wanted the troops to hear. You said you were doing a newsletter.
I did a newsletter, I did a newspaper. It was part of my job to physically put the newspaper together and also to write stories and do photography and basically just write everything that my bosses told me to write and not write anything that they didn't want me to write.
Was that a struggle for you at all?
It was a constant struggle.
Yeah.
I was banned from writing editorials a couple different times. Basically, I was told that the Army doesn't have a sense of humor. And you know,
serious business,
we didn't want to be too honest. Right. Was another thing that I was told frequently. So I was in the military for 6 years. Mm-hmm. I was stop loss for 1 year.
Can you explain what that is to our viewers? What was the stop loss policy?
Yeah, stop loss was the policy that the military enacted, which basically allows it to keep soldiers in the military past their date of active duty contract. Okay. When you join the military, the fine print is that no matter how many years you initially sign up for, they sort of own you for 8 years. And so anytime up until that 8 years, the military can keep you on active duty or call you back to active duty, no matter whatever the case may be. So for me, I was kept in for an extra year and sent to Iraq to do a newspaper on a computer. And basically the job I did, I could have done anywhere with an internet connection. Right. But, you know, in today's military, it's like, get them over there first and ask questions later. So, you know, it was kind of confusing to me at the beginning. And then once I realized how sort of unnecessary the war was, and then how much deception I personally was practicing on a regular basis, I realized that the deception obviously must be much deeper than all that. And I didn't ever really buy the stories that I was putting out there. I don't think many of us did.
What were some of the examples of things that you felt were not what you would have said if you were using your own words to portray your experience in Iraq?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have focused more on what was actually happening on the ground rather than the positive aspects of what was happening on the ground. For example, when I would go out to cover a story, I went out on a night raid at one time, and the group that I was with, there were several squads that went out, and some squads found the people they were looking for, and some people didn't, and the group I was with didn't. But the story I was writing, I was supposed to focus on not the faulty intelligence of the squad that I was with, where they didn't actually have the real information they were looking for, but I was supposed to focus on the number of detainees brought in total. Mm-hmm. And then there was no mention of whether these detainees were actually guilty of anything. You know, it's like, well, they're detained, and it's like, well, good job, us. You know, so that was any story I wrote basically had to boil down to go Army.
So for you, we were talking a little bit beforehand as well, and it sounded like there were a number of things too that both as a result of stop-loss policy, and also when you got back that were really difficult. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like when you got back and out of the service?
Well, I came home from 2 different deployments. The first time I came home, it was about a year between those 2 deployments, and the first time it was extremely difficult because I basically had, as they give you about 2 weeks off and then it's back to work. And no matter what kind of family issues or personal sort of struggles you're dealing with.
So that's 2 weeks. So you're deployed, you're there for how long?
That first time it was a year. The
Okay.
second time it was longer.
Then you're back for 2 weeks.
Then you're back for 2 weeks.
And then you're back again.
Then you're back to work.
Wow.
Well, you're back for 2 weeks, and then you're back to work at your duty station.
Okay.
So you don't have a lot of decompression time. You can go home for 2 weeks and drink as much beer as you can, and make sure you buy your big expensive truck with all the pay that you've saved up, and keep that military.
Did you do
that? No, I did. I bought a Mini Cooper actually off of eBay.
Yeah. And then you went back. Then you go back.
So then so then I was home stateside doing my public affairs / journalism thing,
Right.
stateside for a year, and then I was deployed again. It would have been. The first time was January of 2005 to January of 2006. Second time was March of 2007 to May of 2008. So I was home for a little bit more than a year.
Right.
And then 14 months, went for another 14-month deployment under stop loss as part of the surge. And then came home, and I had built up so many days of paid leave that were supposed to come to me as I was getting out, that the military, my unit realized that if they didn't send me home right away, then I was going to, sort of overlap my
with your leave time.
with my leave
Right,
time.
right.
So they sent me home, and 3 weeks later, I was out of the military completely and on my own. And
What was that experience like?
well, I was sort of just in a daze, I had left for the deployment with, a husband. I'd been married to another soldier. I had left with a husband and a house and a certain sort of vague but sort of good future plans. And then I came home to a completely different scenario. I had a little room and a house in downtown Savannah, Georgia, and 3 weeks to get all my stuff together and get out. And and then I would have the next thing to look forward to,
Right.
which I didn't know what it was going to be. But my psychological evaluation when I came home was one of those things where they were like, "So, do you have any trouble sleeping?" And I was like, "Yes." And they said, "Would you like some Ambien?" And I said, "Okay." And they're like, "All right, here you go."
So they do sort of at the end of service a psychological assessment.
They do what they like to call a psychological assessment, because it's basically, as you can attest to, a questionnaire that you
Right.
fill out, and you're filling it out as fast as you can because you just
Right.
want to be done with the
just
process.
wanna get out of
You just
there.
want to get out of there. You're like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and I'm fine. Can I have my Ambien? Thank you, bye. And so I wasn't coming home thinking I had better get all of my psychological issues addressed right away.
Right.
I was just thinking, let me out of here.
And later, did some things come up for you? And I want to get back to that because I also want to introduce Angelina, but
Yes.
just give us a little bit of information. Did some things come up for you later, and what's your experience been like in working with other vets?
Well, I definitely was dealing with anger issues that were sort of deep-seated based on a lot of, there was self-anger at the work that I'd been doing, and there was sort of just, I don't know, there was sort of an anger with my, I don't actually know what the root of it is,
Right.
but I was having a lot of temper issues.
Right.
So, but my reaction to being home and having nothing else going on was to pack all my stuff into my car and drive around the country like aimlessly for about 7 months, and I would interact with other people. I wanted to be far away from military culture. I would like go to hostels and like stay with the hippies and smoke pot and feel like I was just not in the military anymore as much as
So you had sort of a
possible.
radical kind of let's go the other direction so that I can kind of deal with this reality for me. Let's talk with Angelina a little bit. Angelina Miller, you're from Newark. I should mention that Emily is actually from Oakland.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit, just really briefly, what made you were 19 when you got involved. What made you decide to go into the Marine Corps?
So I was just really, I don't know, like I was not like my brothers. Like I have 2 older brothers. I'm the youngest in my family. So I was just really like tomboyish. I was like out with my dad with the cars, and my brothers were off with their friends and stuff. So I was just like more like rugged and into everything, and just all about it. And like whenever like my brothers got into fights, I got into fights with them.
You were kind of a rough and tumble girl even when you were younger.
Yeah,
and then when
I
you
was
were
more independent.
You were more independent. And then when you were saying earlier that you were kind of struggling in school a little bit, and when you went to the Marine Corps recruiter, you started talking about helping you through school, and they were actually very helpful to get you through school and get your GED or your diploma. Yeah,
I mean, people don't know that actually. Recruiters can help you out in getting your diploma, and they actually can help you going to adult schools and everything like that. And I mean, if you, even if you're not able, like you don't think you're going to graduate on time, you can do those schools on top of that, and they'll keep you.
And you studied as an electrician?
Yeah, I was studying as an electrician or a generator operator.
Okay.
And I was actually in our school. We were actually trained to do pole climbing, and in that I got hurt.
So this was part of your school and part of sort of
part
an
of the
extension
training,
of basic
part
training.
of the instruction. Yes.
Okay. So you were injured. What did that mean for the rest of your military career?
Actually, I got to my permanent unit, and I was hit non-deployable right then. It really, I mean, I got into, I mean, like, I enlisted when it was like the Iraq War, but then it also was like the transition for the Afghanistan War. And
did you end up getting deployed at some point?
I was just non-deployable then, and really for me it was just kind of different. I'm like I guess like a different kind of vet. Like I just I have non-combatant PTSD issues. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And also I have issues that have gone on through the military, called military sexual trauma, that have gone on while I was in the military as well. So
having trauma while you were going through that experience of being in the military, having different kinds of trauma based on traumatic experiences that happened while you were there.
Yeah, and really my time in the Marine Corps actually really sucked. I was harassed on a daily basis, pretty much for 2.5 years. Wow. It sucked. Like, I mean, I saw the Marine Corps at its worst. I saw really how it really is.
Was this based on being a woman, do you think, or what were the kinds of...
No, even men. I mean, my friend, I was going through intensive outpatient therapy, and really there was other people that had, they had gone through the Iraq wars. My friend, he was like, pretty much him and I were roommates, and I was pretty much his caretaker because he had no family.
Wow.
And he had gone through a divorce, and so I had been with him through his divorce, and then on top of that, him suffering through complex PTSD. And
so you were really supporting somebody else, and
while
as a result, you were
going
dealing with
through my PTSD.
Wow.
And really, so I saw everything with PTSD and how really the Marine Corps can treat their Marines and how
So you'd like
other
to see them
services,
do more to
how
that.
other services treat their service members.
What were some of the symptoms? Just give me an idea and our viewers an idea. What are some of the symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder?
So it could be anger. It could be not being able to sleep. It could be being irritable. It could be talking about suicide. I mean, I pretty much stopped him from committing suicide.
Also having flashbacks too, right?
Flashbacks
or feeling
is
the
a huge
initial
one.
trauma.
I mean, I
over again.
experience everything. It could be anxiety, huge anxiety, depression. Like you could be that person and you could be with your friends and be like, no, can we please sit in the corner?
Right.
And then
having a
you want to,
reaction.
you want to have your back to everybody because you're just on guard and you have to watch everything.
So Emily, do you have any statistics at all about how many vets of the Iraq War are dealing with PTSD? I know the numbers are fairly high.
The numbers are really high. In fact, on March 19th, which was the anniversary of the Iraq War, I say anniversary, but it was the 9th year since the beginning of the Iraq War, and Iraq Veterans Against the War,
you work with,
who I work with proudly, we put together a demonstration outside of City Hall in which we observed 1 second of silence, blocking the intersection in front of San Francisco City Hall for every military suicide since the beginning of the Iraq War.
Wow.
And this is 1 second per suicide. And we were standing out in that intersection for, I believe it was an hour and 30 minutes.
Wow. So there's been a very high number. As compared to other generations, this number is much higher. Now, is there any reason for that? What do you think has caused this level of post-traumatic? Obviously, the way that we engage in warfare these days is very different than Vietnam, which we're going to talk about next. What do you think some of the differences are, either in how the military is dealing with soldiers and the treatment of their soldiers, or maybe just even the circumstances of war in general?
Well, I know that the multiple deployments factor is a huge one.
So having to go back again and again.
Having to do, I did 2, and I was one of the ones who did the fewest. Most people that I know who were in when I was in and are still in are now working on their 4th and 5th deployments or more. And that, when you're talking about a year to 15 months at a time, that's just a ridiculous amount of time to be kind of out of touch with a reality that you're going to be going home to.
So out of touch with your families, if you have a husband or wife, completely. You were saying earlier that you, even with the internet, it didn't feel like you were really in a relationship. I would imagine that's true for a lot of vets.
A lot of vets go through hard times with their relationships, and not only that, but just you are engrossed in A, the military culture, and B, the combat zone culture, the deployment culture, and both of those separately and together are just vastly different from the American culture, where you come home and most Americans have not ever served in the military. I think we call ourselves as vets the other 1% of Americans. Because
is it really less than 1%?
It's about 1% of Americans who join the military. So we come home and outside of the other vets that we know, there isn't anybody else that we can relate our experience to.
Right.
Veterans of, for example, Vietnam or World War II or Korea or even the first Gulf War. They've got their experience, which is completely relevant, but it's not the same as that experience of being in these wars, which I don't know how many people still support them. Some people supported them then. I didn't support either Afghanistan or Iraq ever, but you're basically coming home to not being able to relate to anyone. I took off on the road by myself because the thought of going back to school, where I would be with, finishing my undergrad, so in school with 19 and 20-year-olds, whose biggest worry is what color shoes they're going to wear with that jacket.
and you've had such a different experience in life. I would imagine that's true for vets coming back from each war. That was probably the true. I know we're going to hear some stories from the Vietnam vets that were very similar, that people just couldn't understand their experience or relate to it or feel what a big deal it was for them.
The difference with the Vietnam vets, though, I think, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but because there was a draft, everyone in America knew we were at war when Vietnam was happening. Everybody was feeling the effects of that war. Everybody knew somebody and loved somebody who was involved with having to go into that war, and sometimes against their will. Yeah. With this, we come home and we have, because it's an all-volunteer army, right? People are like, well, you volunteered for it, didn't you know? And it's like, well, I never want to expect my country to go and start an illegal war with people who don't deserve to be occupied and invaded, and hearing all of this twisted logic of, well, we had to go to Iraq because Saddam was killing his own people, and it's like, well, what do you think George W. Bush was doing by sending all his own people to war? It's like, those people wouldn't have died if they'd stayed home. The terrorists weren't going to come here and kill thousands and thousands of American soldiers.
And you guys were talking about how young you were, too, and I think you used the term naive. But when we're 18 or 19 years old, how much did you feel like you knew what you were getting into, and did you regret having done what you ended up doing?
Honestly, for me, on a personal standpoint, I don't regret it. I think it just made me into a better person, and I mean now
strengthened you somehow.
I mean now I'm doing a lot more. Like, I'm connecting with more veterans, so I'm doing a lot. I think I'm doing a lot bigger, better. I think things happen for a reason, and I don't like saying that. I mean, what happened while I was stateside and my assaults happened for a reason, but honestly, me connecting and helping other veterans and supporting other veterans. So I mean, like, I'm a founder of the MST Recovery Network of the Bay Area.
What is MST?
Military Sexual Trauma.
Great.
And then also I'm going to be starting a nonprofit called Fight Strong, which is fighting for veterans and military suffering from PTSD.
Angelina, when you were in the service, were you able to talk to your superiors about what had happened? Were you able to file any kind of papers or a case?
Honestly, like, while I was going through I got assaulted, and during that whole time, I was trying to do everything for my medical stuff to try to get the right treatment. And really, it's so hard to get the right treatment. It was difficult. Like, if I didn't have supportive parents, which a lot of military don't sometimes, I don't think I would be here today.
And were the perpetrators of the violence against you ever brought to justice? Is that something that you're still working on? Is there a way for them to be brought to justice?
Honestly, I don't even know right now, because honestly, there's things that, I mean, like, I'm working with Jackie Spear, I'm working with Diane Feinstein, I'm working.
Great.
I just came back from the Servicewomen Actions Network in DC, so we're trying to do as much as we can for military sexual trauma awareness.
That's great. That's really great, Angelina.
So.
Do you know Gavin Newsom's wife, Jennifer Newsom? She's actually working on a film about this very topic. So we'll have to get her in touch with you, because it seems like you would be a really strong advocate.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I love what Emily and everything they're doing as well, like, they're honestly, like, I've seen all the pictures that they did, what you guys did, and man, like, honestly, like, when I saw the pictures, like, it touched me so much, like, it made me want to cry.
What did it make you feel when you saw that there are veterans who are speaking out against the war, who are speaking out about what's happening, problems in the military? How did that make you feel?
It's empowering. Like, you don't want to give up. It's kind of like, you're like, I say like a lot. You don't want to, you don't want to stop.
It makes you feel like, boy, there's some other people who are involved in this fight, and maybe we have a chance to bring people to justice and make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else.
Yeah, definitely.
Emily, can you talk a little bit about what Iraq Veterans Against the War are doing and how people can find out more information and get involved? What are some of the activities that your organization has done?
Well, Iraq Veterans Against the War is a national organization, so I'm a member of the Bay Area chapter. And there are also chapters, members at large, which, if there isn't a chapter available to you, you can still link up with other members. But the website is ivaw.org.
Okay, great.
And so some of the things that IVAW is doing is, first, there are a huge number of soldiers who are active duty who are being forced to deploy multiple times, as we've covered.
Right.
And many of those vets have PTSD and they're still being made to deploy. Wow. Even though company and unit policy at those bases is not, it doesn't allow it. It's still basically the general is not following his own policies.
Wow.
In Fort Hood. This is specifically in Fort Hood, but in Fort Lewis and other frequently deploying places. So IVAW has this campaign called Operation Recovery, which you can find at operationrecovery.org. And what we're trying to do with that is first empower vets to stand up for their own rights and to not feel too stigmatized by perceptions of weakness, to go and seek help.
Absolutely.
And go and make sure that your commander will let you do that. And so IVAW members have started GI-run coffee shops in outside of a couple different bases. Outside of Fort Hood, there's Under the Hood. Outside of Joint Base, yes, it's called Under the Hood. Outside of Joint Base Lewis McChord, up near Seattle, or outside of Tacoma, there's Coffee Strong.
Wonderful.
And so basically, these places where soldiers can go to find out more information about what their rights are and what kind of help there is for them, because as try as we may, the Afghanistan war is still raging on, and Iraq veterans are still being sent to Afghanistan. Just because one war is over doesn't mean vets get a break, soldiers get a break. So IVAW is here to be a support system for vets who don't necessarily want to deal with the military's quote-unquote support system.
Right. So it's another layer of support.
Right.
So we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get a chance to get those resources that you want to send people to. How do veterans get involved with the organization, with the IVAW?
Yes. Well, you go to ivaw.org.
Okay,
if you're a vet, you can fill out a membership application online, and you provide your proof of service, and you're basically in. And then, but if you don't want to be a card-carrying member, you can still be involved. Just go to the website. There are blogs. There's events listed. Anytime a chapter is having events, we try to get it up there on the website. And there's also Facebook groups.
Excellent.
There's Iraq Veterans Against the War members and supporters Facebook group, and you can just Google us, and any phone number you find is, people are happy to talk and just be there, because we're not the majority. The Iraq vets who are against the war are not the majority, and we get more blowback by other vets than anybody, but we are here for those of our brothers and sisters who need us.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank both of you, Angelina Miller from Newark, Iraq veteran, and also...
Thank you for having me.
What's that?
I said thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming down. It's really been great, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to provide justice for those who had the same experience of you, and to make sure it doesn't happen again. And Emily Yates, thank you so much for coming down from Oakland, and I really just commend both of you for the work that you're doing to really bring awareness and attention to these issues. So thanks so much for being on the program today, and good luck with your work.